She walked into the cafe quietly, her scarf slipping just enough to reveal the scars across her neck and face. The moment people noticed, the whispers began. A few laughed, others exchanged pitying glances, as if her scars defined who she was. But she kept her head down, ordered her coffee, and sat at the corner table, ignoring the stares. For most, she was just an ordinary woman carrying visible wounds of a past no one cared to ask about. Then, as she reached to pay, her sleeve lifted slightly, revealing a faded unit tattoo inked on her forearm. That's when a man in uniform, an older veteran sitting nearby, froze. His eyes widened, his hands trembled. He stood up slowly and approached her. The room went silent as he softly spoke. "Ma'am, were you with the 312th? She looked up in surprise and nodded. In that moment, the laughter died. The veteran snapped to attention, saluted her, and his voice cracked as he said, "You're a hero." The crowd watched in stunned silence. Those who had mocked her scars now realized they weren't marks of shame, but symbols of survival, sacrifice, and honor. The woman smiled faintly, not out of pride, but relief, because someone finally saw her for who she truly was. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. The veteran, his eyes misting over, asked if he could sit with her. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As they spoke quietly, bits of her story began to unfold. Years ago, she had served alongside medics in a combat zone. An explosion had left her with deep scars, ones she carried for the rest of her life. But instead of being honored, she had grown used to the sideways glances, the hushed laughter, and the cruel judgment of strangers. The veteran shook his head, almost ashamed of the crowd around them. He raised his voice just enough so others could hear. "These scars are proof of courage, proof she stood where many would never dare to stand. We owe people like her our respect, our freedom." His words struck the room like a hammer. Those who had laughed earlier lowered their eyes, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The woman sat quietly, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. For the first time in a long time, someone had defended her not out of pity, but out of genuine recognition. The veteran extended his hand, and when she placed hers in his, he squeezed it firmly, like a brother welcoming a sister back home. Around them, the mood transformed. A young man who had mocked her minutes earlier walked over and apologized, his voice trembling. Others followed, offering nods of respect. What had begun as a moment of ridicule had turned into a lesson. Never judge the scars you see, because behind each one may be a story of sacrifice you'll never fully understand. The woman took a deep breath, her eyes glistening but steady. She wasn't used to this kind of recognition. For years, she had tried to blend into the background, hiding her pain beneath scarves and silence. Now, with the veteran beside her, she finally felt seen. Not for her scars, but for the strength they represented. Before leaving, the veteran stood tall and saluted once more. His voice carried through the cafe. "Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they walk among us quietly, carrying battles no one else can see." His words silenced the last trace of mockery. People looked at her differently now, not as a victim, but as someone who had given more than most ever would. As she walked out of the cafe, the same whispers followed her, but this time they were filled with respect. Some even stood to honor her. She smiled faintly, not because the world had changed, but because at least in that moment, it had remembered the value of sacrifice. Her scars had once been the reason she was judged. Now they had become the reason people remembered her as something greater than herself. A living reminder that true beauty lies in courage, and true respect is earned not by appearances, but by the battles we survive. Days later, the woman returned to the same cafe. This time, things were different. The same people who once mocked her now greeted her with respect. The whispers had turned into nods, the laughter into warm smiles. She still carried her scars, but now they were seen as medals of resilience rather than marks of shame. The veteran met her again, and over coffee, they spoke about the comrades they had lost, the battles that never left their minds, and the quiet loneliness of coming back to a world that often forgets its protectors. For both of them, That simple meeting had become a turning point, a reminder that recognition, even from one person, can heal wounds that years of silence never could. One evening, as she walked past a group of young people outside the cafe, she overheard one of them say, "That's the lady who served in the war. She's a hero." For the first time, she didn't lower her head. She looked up, her step steady, her heart lighter, because now she knew scars aren't weaknesses to hide. They are stories of battles fought, lives saved, and strength earned. And sometimes, it takes just one person, the right person, to remind the world of that truth. Weeks passed, and word about that day in the cafe quietly spread around the town. People who had once judged her for her appearance now found themselves reflecting on their own behavior. Some even admitted that her strength had inspired them to face their own struggles more bravely. The woman, who had spent years hiding in the shadows of shame, began to walk a little taller. She no longer wore long scarves to cover her face. Not because the scars disappeared, but because she had finally accepted them as part of her story. Each mark told of sacrifice, of survival, and of loyalty to something greater than herself. One afternoon, as she passed a small memorial for fallen soldiers, she stopped and placed her hand over her tattoo. The veteran was already there, saluting the names etched into stone. When their eyes met, they didn't need words, because both knew they carried the same truth. Some battles never leave you, but they also shape who you are meant to be. And so, the woman walked on, no longer the lady with scars, but the hero with courage. Her story was no longer one of pain but of honor, a reminder that scars aren't ugly. They are the most powerful proof that we are still standing. From that day on, the woman's life was never quite the same. She didn't suddenly become famous, and she didn't seek attention, but everywhere she went, she carried herself with quiet pride. Those who once mocked her now lowered their eyes with respect, knowing they had once laughed at someone braver than themselves. The veteran often checked in on her, sometimes with a phone call, sometimes by meeting for coffee. In him, she found not just a friend, but a reminder that she wasn't alone, that someone truly understood the battles she had fought. Together, they became a symbol of resilience, proof that scars, seen or unseen, carry stories the world needs to hear. Over time, she learned something powerful. Scars do not diminish beauty, they redefine it. Her scars weren't chains holding her back, but wings that carried the story of survival, courage, and sacrifice. And while people might still stare, she no longer feared their gaze because she had nothing to hide. Her story became a silent lesson to everyone who crossed her path. Never judge the wounds you see, for they may be the very reason you live in peace today. And so, the simple woman once laughed at for her scars was finally remembered not for the pain she carried, but for the courage she embodied. Months later, the cafe where it all began became a place of quiet remembrance. People no longer whispered when she entered. Instead, they greeted her warmly. Some even brought their children, pointing to her softly and saying, "That woman is brave. Learn from her." What once felt like a place of judgment had turned into a place of respect. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she walked home past the town square. A small group of teenagers were laughing and joking, but when they noticed her tattoo, their expressions changed. One of them stepped forward and asked politely, "Were you really in the unit?" She nodded. To her surprise, they thanked her. And in that simple moment, she realized something extraordinary. Her scars were no longer symbols of ridicule. They had become symbols of honor to a younger generation. The veteran often reminded her, "We carry the stories others forget. Our scars are history written on skin." Those words stayed with her. She understood now that every mark was not a reason to hide, but a reason to stand tall. And so, the woman who once walked with her head bowed now walked with steady steps, her scars no longer hidden, her spirit unbroken. She wasn't just a survivor. She was living proof that courage doesn't fade. It grows stronger with time. Her story whispered through the lives she touched. Scars do not make us less. They make us unforgettable. Years later, the woman grew older, but her scars remained. They faded a little with time, but they never truly disappeared. And she no longer wished they would. Each mark was a page in a story of resilience, written in pain but sealed with honor. The veteran eventually passed away, leaving behind his own legacy of service. At his memorial, the woman stood among soldiers and civilians alike. Many saluted her as she walked by, recognizing her not just as a guest, but as one of them. For the first time in her life, she felt fully accepted, seen not as the scarred woman, but as a soldier who had given her all. As she placed a flower on his grave, she whispered quietly, "Thank you for reminding me who I really am." When she turned to leave, a young soldier stopped her. He pointed at her tattoo and said, "Ma'am, I wear the same unit patch today. You inspire us." Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they were tears of pride. Her journey had come full circle. She no longer carried shame, she carried a legacy. And as she walked into the setting sun, her story remained behind as a lesson to everyone who remembered her. Scars are not the end of beauty, nor the end of dignity. They are the beginning of strength, the voice of history, and the proof that even in pain, there is honor.